y'all know I always kind of like share the thing right from the start, and then we talk about what that is. But the biggest thing and the biggest shift is going to be annoying, but it is when something didn't work out once, deciding that it won't work out again is the biggest thing I see keeping people stuck. And the shift is really this opportunity to kind of see that through a different lens. But so many of us in business will do something once, like we'll do a live launch, or we'll launch membership, or we'll try to sell out 101 or whatever. If it doesn't work the first time, we create all these stories, and then our industry supports those stories. So we'll create stories like, well, I just don't have the right audience, or um, you know funnels don't work for me, or Facebook groups don't work for me, or live launching doesn't work for me. Like we'll create all these stories, right? Because something didn't work one time. And then what I see happen to people on the worst case scenario of this is they jump from thing to thing to thing to thing, looking for the thing that's going to work. And then they end up making their world so fucking small because they've tried 12 different things that didn't work, and they feel like they're stuck and have nowhere else to go. Like they're in that I've tried it all and none of it works place. And again, unfortunately, our industry kind of profits off that. It kind of builds on that idea of like, see, this thing isn't working for you, and so you have to try this thing instead. And we really fall down these rabbit holes. But the truth in business is that a lot of things aren't going to work the first time, right? Or something might work the first time, then it might not work the third time, or a variety of things in between. We'll talk about some specific examples of what that could look like. But most things, like most of my clients don't like have one launch and just fucking feel like they crushed it immediately, right? They're like, oh, that was kind of rocky, and like, okay, I can see what I can do better next time, or whatever, like that. I mean, obviously you can have a great launch a first round. I'm not necessarily saying that, but usually everything takes improvement. Like some of my clients that are making the most money right now had shitty first launches, had to do 20 calls where they got no's before they got a yes. And what sticks most people is that they'll get those 20 no's and they'll go, see, calls don't work for me, right? And then they'll try something else. See, launching isn't really the thing for my people. How often do we hear something like that, right? I have a whole separate side note that we can talk about there. Launching isn't the thing for my people, or whatever. And again, then what happens is we're shrinking our potential and our world so much, because then you hire the next coach and they're like, oh, okay, well, why don't we launch this? And you're like, oh, no, launches don't work for me. Like they're stuck then too, right? So in business, it's really about not seeing it as I did something once and so it's not going to work again. Even if you did it 2 times or whatever, like we have to be so careful that we're not making the story that because I did this and I didn't get the result I want, which by the way is very different than did it work or did it not work, I don't want to do it again. So when I talk about the difference of did I get the result versus did it work, notice how those are very different things, especially if you're trying something for the first time. You have no data or context to go off of. So you're just setting this arbitrary random goal to like, whatever, have a 50K launch. Okay. I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with setting a stretch goal. I love a stretch goal. But like, if you think because I don't hit it, then it means it didn't work, you're totally missing the point that was a completely arbitrary goal to begin with, right? Brittany said, I just had my first group program launch, and even though I filled the spaces, it felt so nerve-wracking. Thank you, Brittany. Exactly, right? And it would probably be so easy to be like, I don't want to launch again. That was too nerve-wracking. Instead of like, okay, like I launched and it's that time was nerve-wracking, but next time I want it to be less so, right? Like you can really see the difference there. Paula says, yes, the stories reinforce our belief that something doesn't work 100%. Tristan said, a lot like having a few bad dating app experiences and deciding dating isn't for you. I mean, so much to say about that. Yes, right? I mean, even relationships, I think, is a good thing to think about. Like, it'd be like, I didn't marry the first guy I dated. So, like, fuck it. Dating's not for me or whatever. Like, relationships aren't for me. Like, I know very few people who married the first person they dated. It's But are you going to decide that like relationships aren't for you? And obviously some people make that decision, but it's usually not like the best and most healthy for us to kind of try it, cut it off. What we're really doing is being scared of the disappointment, right? Brittany says, I felt that. Am I capable of launching again? Right. So good. I just love you, Brittany, and how you always like are so willing to be transparent and share all of that. And so appreciative of that. But right, like it's one of those things where you can start telling the story like, I'm just not someone who does well with launches, right? Personally, in my business, you guys know, like I have chosen not to do launches, but I will tell you, and this is a whole part of this conversation too. I feel like I'm jumping around. I promise I'll streamline it here. But I do not tell the story that like I don't launch well or I don't like launches or whatever. Like my consistent story is like I choose not to launch. I choose to focus on one-on-one, which is so different and so much more empowering than like launching doesn't work for me. I'm not built for launches. I'm not capable of launching well. I get super stressed out in launches. No. Right? I always want launching to be an on deck option for me. It is not one that I'm currently picking, but I'm also like really unwilling to form such a story around it that I can't pull it out of my back pocket if I want to. And so that's really something to think about, right? Is that are you forming all these stories where you're taking all of these strategies off the table? Well, all that's doing is making you feel more disempowered because you feel like I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that. Like it really starts to affect you in a big way when you don't feel like there is a whole plethora of options available to you. That's a conversation I'm having with clients all the time. Like, you know, okay, cool. We didn't get the result you wanted this way. Have you thought about this? Have we thought about this? We could try this. We could try this. We could try this. There's like 10 options on the table. We're not going to pick all 10, but knowing that they're there is so important. But if you have that conversation and then you're like, no, I've tried that one. I've tried that one. I've tried that one. It didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't work. You're so fucked mentally, right? Your business starts to feel like a trap versus actually, you know, leading into the potential that's there. So I'll go back to the first piece of this, which is like, you will probably have to do something multiple times. I'm talking a lot this week about how ease is really different than easy. And that is true with all of this. Like, I don't know anybody who thought their first launch was their easiest launch. I don't know anyone who thought their first 10 calls were their easiest calls. I don't know anyone who thought, you know, like the first 2 weeks of content they put out were the easiest. That's not how it rolls, right? But if we start making it wrong from the start because it doesn't feel easy, then we're stuck. And then if we start making it wrong because it didn't get us the result we wanted, like let's use that example I was using earlier, 50K launch, right? I wanted a 50K launch. I wanted a 50K launch. I wanted a 50K launch. I don't get that. Let's say I get 35K. Then I will start saying launches don't work for me. You have 35K. That's amazing. What if launches for sure could be working for you? What if they could work better and better each time? Right? That has to be the mentality we take as business owners. And again, it doesn't mean you can't choose not to do something. Again, I choose not to launch. It's very different than launches don't work for me. Okay. Belinda says my first date from a dating app definitely wasn't the easiest. That is a perfect one. Like, of fucking course not. The worst, right? Actually, I do have one friend who is now married to the first date she went on from a dating app. So kudos to her. You never fucking know, but I hear you. But yeah, it's so easy to get in that trap. Like the only way something doesn't work is if you stop taking data from it and learning from it, right? Like sincerely, like if you even if you had a 50K goal and you hit 10, cool. What do we do to serve the shit out of the people in there and get you the best testimonials ever and relaunch quickly? What do we take away from that? What do we learn from that? Like, were they clicking but just not converting? Was no one interested in this topic? Was our messaging off? Like, there is so much to be gained from every one of those things if you can get neutral enough to look at that, right? What usually happens is we're so triggered that we didn't get the result that we want that we can't even look at it neutrally. And so we just avoid and kind of walk away. It's like very much a stress response to say, didn't work, right? It's like very stress cycle-esque to like push it away and avoid versus dive in, learn each time, and actually make it better. And it takes a lot of like deliberate intent and a lot of mindset work to be able to do that. But when you can do that, you're never going to be like, that didn't work. So I'll use that example I was also talking about earlier, my client who did, I think, 20 calls. Yeah, so I can't remember the exact number, but like ballpark-ish, before she got a client, right? Now she has a 7-figure business. Okay. Like you cannot make that mean anything, but it would have been so easy for her. And trust me, she tried, like all of our brains try at the time to be like, see, calls don't work for me. But instead she was like, I want to figure out how to get calls to work for me. So what am I learning from each of these 20 calls? What is my takeaway? What am I doing differently? What can I grasp from it? Right. But if you decide it doesn't work, you lose all of like the juicy data and market research that comes from doing those things, right? So if you write it off, you're not looking at like, well, where was the messaging offer? Where was this? Like, again, example I used earlier is that so often we're like, I'm just in front of the wrong audience. Like, I need a different audience completely. And I'm not saying that could never be it, but it's like, well, like, what can we learn from this audience? Like, what would it take to convert this one in front of you? Like, what would that look like? Versus, again, the avoidance and the jumping ship. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Belinda said, wow. See, Belinda, there's hope. Let me know if this is making sense, though. It is absolutely going to be a requirement in entrepreneurship to be willing to have something not work and do it again and again and again still. And so, especially if you want to hit 6 figures, right? That's like literally how I titled this live stream, because almost reliably, every single one of my clients that hits that mark has worked the same thing over and over again. And when you work the same thing over and over again, there are plenty of times where it doesn't seem like it's working. And what so many of us do is obsess over it not working so much that we can't actually look at it and see where we can make tweaks. And we don't actually then go make the tweaks because we're too uncomfortable. Does that make sense? So like, say I do the 20 calls and I'm like, okay, I can really see that like I'm not diving into objections. I'm not, really having that conversation. I'm not really fully leaning into that blah, 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 right? Then what most of us want to do and what our industry will support there is fuck it. I'm not doing discovery calls. I heard someone talking about how they don't do discovery calls. And so I'm just not doing them. This is crap. I shouldn't, have to do this kind of thing. Right. Versus like, go all the way into like, cool, how do I change it next time? Right. Like legitimately, how do I not keep repeating this same experience over and over again? Or I just keep doing it, but I don't actually learn from it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just like, fine, Lacey says do the thing, so I'll do the thing, but it's not working and there's nothing to be gained here. Never. Like, it was always where you find the data and the interest, right? Tristan said, oh man, it took me an uncomfortable amount of posts to book my first call. I was starting to really question my hairstyle. Yeah, I mean, obviously that was the problem. Paula said, third round on one of my group programs, and every time it's better than the last. Exactly. It's so true. Michelle says, doing the thing again and again was one of my biggest takeaways when you were on Julia's podcast. I keep reminding myself of that as I mentally prepare myself for the next step on our infertility journey. Yes. Oh, Michelle, totally. I think that we just never know when, the thing's going to happen, or it's going to, like I always say in business, when you're going to pop, so to speak. Right. But when you can not make the little pieces of it mean so much, like in business, we'll use Tristan's example. I have to make an uncomfortable amount of posts to get my first call. It would be so easy in that moment to be like, I'm just not doing calls. And you can find someone on the internet that'll tell you why you shouldn't have to do calls, right? But if you're like, well, what's happening? Can I put a bit.ly link on them and see which ones people are even clicking on? Are they just not clicking at all? Are they just not seeing them? Can I look at the reach? Like, what's actually happening here? Like, there's so much to be gleaned from that, and then to do something with it. And I think another thing that's really helpful to think about there is that will be true no matter what thing you try, right? There's not a thing that you're going to try where you won't have to repeat it, where you won't have to learn from it, where you won't have to get that data, where you won't have to sit in the discomfort of something not working out the way that you wanted it to or thought it would. But you get to pick what that thing is, or you can jump around for years and years and years and years, again, making your world very small, assuming that there will be a thing that clicks enough that you never don't get a result, or you're never not uncomfortable, or that works right away, right? And I think what's so dangerous, I mean, I'm using that word in the not actual way, but like in the mindset way, I think what's so dangerous in our industry is that there is always someone who will buy into that story with you. That's why I personally really believe in one-on-one support and one-on-one coaching, because you need someone to remind you of that when you're in it, of like, sure, like you can go try this other thing, but like, what if we learn from this thing? Sure, you can go do that, but like, what if we like really, really, really didn't make a story that, you know, you couldn't book calls, or that you sucked at launching, or whatever that is, right? Like, we absolutely need that reflection, and we need someone that's willing to like hold us to that and call us on that, because that's what truly will make the difference, versus someone that'll be like, oh, you hate talking to people on calls, but you want to sell coaching. It's fine. It's fine. You don't have to get on calls. I'll tell you how to not get on calls. But the same issue plays itself out. Then you're like, oh, wait, but if I don't get on calls and I have to like cold DM people, oh, that fucking freaks me out too. Like, that doesn't work for me. Right. And then we spiral over and over again. Hi, Jen. Belinda says there is literally someone on the internet who will tell you whatever you want to hear, but you have to choose persistence. Exactly. And there's always an easy out, right? And again, that's why I believe in one-on-one coaching so much, because I really do think there's just always that easy tap out, where when someone's holding that mirror to you one-on-one, it's so different to be able to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing that thing. And there's no shame in that. I do that for my clients literally all day. I'm not like, you're getting it wrong, trying to tap out here, but it's like, hey, let's ask a better question. Like, what are we trying to avoid here? What's uncomfortable? What can we learn from this? How do we get to neutral enough to actually get the data from it so we can make an informed decision, right? And so much of that really comes from staying in the experience. So, you know, it's not that I've never had a client pivot or change strategies or do any of those things, but what I really try to make sure with them is that it's from the right place. It's not to avoid something, right? Or it's not because we think something isn't working. I am so like, if you're one of my clients, I'm sorry, but I am a psycho with my clients about that. Like, do not come to me with that it's not working thing, because we will make it work. You have to keep pressing on that, even if it takes a long time. Like, you do not want to make your world so small that you are someone that has all these stories built up that like, it doesn't work for me to have calls or whatever that is, right? Like, I am so, you know, like hard on my clients about that, because again, it doesn't mean you have to do calls, but if you're not doing them because the story is that it doesn't work for you, you're really just harming your business long-term, right? It feels more comfortable in the moment, but it's going to create so much distrust in yourself long-term, because what you're really saying is that there are all these things that could possibly not work for me. And then it puts you on this treasure hunt through our industry that, again, our industry is kind of set up to feed like, okay, so there are all these things that could not work, and now I need to find the one that will, right? And then I'm being sarcastic, but like fucking legit, right? Then you jump from thing to thing to thing to thing, thinking that it is totally and fully possible that there are all these things that might not work for you, right? And so then I'll bring that back to what I said earlier, which is it doesn't mean you can't have choice. Again, I don't personally do big launches, although I guess we're kind of launching Million Her Forum, but like, it's so funny because I haven't even categorized that in my head as a launch. Like, it just occurred to me that technically that is a launch. But you know, that's not really how I roll, but it's because I choose not to. It's not because launches couldn't work for me, or not because I, you know, have any notion that like that doesn't work for my audience, or that doesn't work for me, or whatever, right? It's not true. So much so that it didn't even occur to me until this very moment that technically we're launching, because it's just not charged for me. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I'm about showing up and making the posts and sending the emails. It's just not charged enough for me to be like, oh my God, I said I don't launch and now I'm launching. Like, whoa, no, it doesn't matter. It's just a thing I'm doing in my business, right? Shari says, you are. Yes, technically, yes. Yes, I am. Good to know it. Hey, Sarah. Belinda said, I'd like to cancel our call for tomorrow. Yeah. Don't you come to me with that? Not, it's not working shit. No, I'm kidding. Right. But I do think like having that mirror for that is important. So I would literally, if you're listening to this, make a list of the things that you think didn't work for you in your business and really look at like, how can I play with that? When you take full charge of that and when you take ownership over that, it is so empowering. Like usually what happens when I have a new client that comes to me, they'll come to me, and usually a lot of my clients have already done other things or tried other programs or things. And so I'll usually say to them like, cool, give me a rundown of like what you've done before, what's worked for you, what hasn't, that kind of thing. And as soon as we get to like, well, here are all the things that don't work for me kind of thing, I'm so quick to kind of be like, cool, how could we make that one work? What would it look like if we tried that one? Why didn't that one work? Let's dive really deep into all the reasons we think that one didn't work. Let's really figure out what actually happened there. Like it didn't work isn't a good enough reason. Like we have to have specifics. It didn't work because I didn't work it could be one, and that's totally fine. It didn't work because, you know, I didn't see the launch all the way through. It didn't work because I actually didn't really want to sell it. It didn't work because I got really distracted and didn't finish it. Like there could be 100 things, but we need to actually know the empowered answer to that. And again, if you want to move on from a strategy, you can, but if you don't actually know what the answer is, you're going to spin your wheels forever. So this is something that I really do as like a big thought exercise with a lot of my clients is like, if there is anything that they're saying didn't work, I'm like, you need to tell me exactly how, and we need to figure out exactly why. And we're kind of not moving on until we do, right? Because if not, again, you make your world really small. But if the answer is like, well, because I didn't, so actually this happened with a client recently. She had kind of come to me being like, yeah, I want to scale, but like launches don't work for me. Right. And we did kind of a retrospective on that. And it's like, well, what you're really saying is that you always had open cart for 2 weeks and you always got really freaked out after early bird ended and just stopped selling. So technically launches don't not work for you. You just never finished a launch. Right. And she was like, oh my God, like I never even realized that. Like, it's so funny because she lived it, but it was like legitimate new news, basically, right? And I say that not to make her wrong, but to say that that's how our brains work. Like it didn't work and we just shut it off. We don't take it any further. We don't process that out. Right. And so it literally feels like new news when we're like, oh my God, what actually happened is I stopped launching. Interesting. And so much freedom came back to her after that. And she literally did a launch, finished the launch, filled the program. Right. And she also was able to think about that really differently. She didn't go into a launch being like, oh my God, my coach wants me to do a launch, but launches do not work for me. Right. She went into that being like, okay, the one goal I have for this launch is to see it all the way through. Right. And then again, that's where one-on-one support comes in, because the whole launch, anytime she was kind of having a wobble, I was like, your only goal of this launch is to see it all the way through. Your only goal of this launch is to finish it. Your only goal is to see it all the way through. Right. And then of course she did. So I really would challenge you to make a list of all the things you think are not working for you or didn't work or don't work for your audience or whatever that story is, and walk it all the way through, number one, and then be willing to change that story is number two. Like there is so much power in that you can't even imagine, right? Like when you think, oh my God, something's not working. And then you actually allow yourself to stay in it and look at the data long enough to have that moment where it works, you are so resilient and unstoppable in business, right? One of my clients just went through something similar to this. And she keeps saying to me, like, I just feel unfuckwithable. Like I've never felt this level of unfuckwithable again before. Because she like went through this thing when she thought it wasn't working, stayed in it, saw it through, came out on the other end in a better situation, and now has all this personal power to take to each new situation. But again, if she let that situation mean, oh, there are bad things that can happen and things that don't work. And so now my job is to be on the hunt for what could work and what couldn't, and be on alert for all the things that might not. Like, OMG, right? Tristan said I volunteer as tribute for Belinda's call slot. Wow, that is very interesting, Belinda. You're gonna have to reply to that and let him know. Claire says it all works when you work it, baby. Yeah, totally. And I think it all works when you take that power back, is a good way to say it too. When you see that difference, guys? Like when you really believe there is just something that could just not work, right? Really disempowering. When I have a personal example of this that's kind of silly, but I'm going to tell it because it feels relevant to this. But this was pre-pandemic. This hasn't been happening recently, which you'll understand in a minute. But I have this like massive fear of roller coasters. I think it's because, well, I know it's because I'm a control freak. So obviously I feel incredibly out of control, like strapped into this thing. And I think about like, who are the people that check these things? Like they're humans too. Like what? Anyway, big thing for me. But Kenny loves that. And we have season passes, or had season passes to Busch Gardens. And we would go for a lot of their like events. Like they do like a beer and wine festival, Halloween Horror Nights, all this stuff. And I would find myself like always being like, but no to the roller coaster. And then I kind of just realized one day, like, I don't want that to be my truth. Like, I don't want there to be a thing that I'm just such a no to, that like, I can't, like, oh my God. Right. And so we started going like once a week, and I would ride like one every time we went. Like sometimes I did multiple, but it was like, depends, really special day then. But to really get over the story that like, I am not someone who can ride a roller coaster. Two, I might choose not to ride one. Like it's not my fave thing in the world. I'm certainly not like going to choose that over and over again all the time, which again, you can totally have those things in business where you're like, that's just not my fave. I wouldn't pick it. Right. But for me to feel at choice versus to feel like I can't was totally a different dynamic and experience. Right. So it felt like when we would go before, and Kenny would be like, are you sure you don't want to just try it? It would literally feel like an I can't. Right. Versus like now it just feels like I might want to today. I might not want to. Like we'll see, but I totally can, and I'll totally be okay. And it's totally fine. Right. So same thing in business. It doesn't mean that because you like work through this thing that you have to choose it over and over again. Again, like I'm not choosing launches all the time, but see how different it is when it feels like I'm not choosing launches. I'm not choosing to ride the roller coaster today versus I am not someone who rides roller coasters, right? But didn't feel fun or expansive to me. I'm not someone who calls work for. Does that feel fun or expansive in any way? Of course not. I'm not someone who launches work for. No, and again, then we put it on our audience sometimes too, right? My audience isn't someone who, my audience, like, what? No, right? See how trapped we can get in all of these things, right? Maggie says, I don't like roller coasters either. And that is not something I want to change about myself, but I love that you had this experience at Choice always. Exactly, totally. Like, I don't necessarily want to become a person that loves them. I just want to become a person that's not dictated by that, right? I want my business to be not dictated by the idea that like my audience doesn't blank, right? So much permission there. But the thing I will say about the roller coaster experience is that it was not comfortable, right? Like oh my God. I wish I could have Kenny come tell this story because he tells it pretty well. The first time I did it, my body had like the most visceral reaction I have like ever experienced. Like, I mean, I can't even tell you the level of sweat that was pouring out of me. It was like almost like I looked like I just ran like a full marathon. I was like shaking so hard. I just felt, I mean, it was just like the most physiological reaction kind of thing. And I'm not saying like a call has to be that, right? But I'm just pointing that out to say, it's not the most comfortable, but it really did get better every time, right? Like I went from that first time of being like, whoa to, the last time I did it. The last time we went, it was like actually kind of fun. Right. And so that's how stuff can get in your business too, where like that first time you launch, like Brittany was saying earlier, you might be like, holy fuck, that was intense. Like that was so much. That was so intense. Da, da, da. And then you can decide, okay, cool. I'm not someone who does that. Or you can decide, I bet it would be better next time. I bet that's still an option on the table for me. Cool. I did it. So I know I could do it again. So fucking different. So I think that in the email I had said, this is like the one I always say, like, you can do whatever you want, but this is like one of the one thing that I would say absolutely stop doing. And it really is true. Like this one, you would be very hard pressed to change my mind around, but this is what we have to stop doing, which is like, again, deciding that just because it didn't work once, that it doesn't work. Most things in business take that time, take that energy, just like my roller coaster experience, right? Again, just like dating, you're probably not going to marry the first person you date. Like it's going to take that time. Tristan said that's exactly the way I sweat when I launch Bumble. For sure. There you go. So just means you have to do it more and more, right? That was my takeaway for you there, Tristan. But yeah, that's kind of the whole thing. And again, like one other piece I would say there is that, why do we tell ourselves that story? Predominantly because we're looking to avoid the disappointment of it not working again, and so that's a whole other piece of this mindset work. And this is like the opportunity there is like, how could I be okay if it didn't work again and again and again? How could I be okay if I had to do this multiple times before it worked? How could I enjoy the process of doing it multiple times before it worked, right? So that's a thing I would kind of invite you to as one of the takeaways here too is, am I willing? How willing am I, right? Am I willing to do it again and again until it works? And then how can I enjoy the process of actually doing that without making it wrong, without making it mean something, right? Without being like, well, my audience doesn't X. Well, my, personality isn't suited to Y, so I can't, right? No, it's like, cool, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be willing to be uncomfortable enough to do this. And then I'm going to decide, what I might want to do to actually make it fun, to actually enjoy it, to actually, enjoy the process. Like, so for me, again, roller coaster example was like, when we went, it would be like the first thing I did when we got there. And then we would always do something like really fun part that I wanted to do afterwards. So I was like creating like fun in the experience of it, right? So same thing for you, like, cool, if you're going to get on 20 calls, right? Like, how do you make those fun? How do you actually enjoy those calls? How do you, make it fun to like brain dump afterwards, what you learned from it, that kind of stuff. That helps you see the progress along the way. If you're only looking for that end result of worked or didn't work, you're stuck forever kind of thing, because most of the things that eventually work won't feel like they're working at first, right? Just like the first time you run a challenge versus the fifth time you run a challenge, like it's definitely going to feel like it didn't work the first time. Probably you won't get as many people as you wanted, maybe, right? Or like maybe as many people as you hoped converted wouldn't, or maybe you like messed something up or the wrong emails went out or whatever. Totally different than the fifth time. So if you can really decide, I am going to not make this mean anything except data, right? You start winning in business. If you decide that every single thing works or doesn't work, you've completely given away your power, right? Completely given it to your audience, to this industry, to whatever, some like unknown factor in business. Like that is what it looks like to give away your power. What it looks like to take it back is, again, I might choose not to do this, but if I want to make calls work, I will make calls work, right? If I want to make launching work, I will make launching work. And I know that can feel like push or force energy, but it doesn't have to be like I will do it at all costs. It's more like I will stay in it and enjoy the process enough until it comes to me, right? So it doesn't have to be that like hyper driven intensity of like, I will force everything. But it certainly is that empowered place of like, I know I can have what I want, right? So I really hope that's helpful. I feel like if there is anything that I would love for most entrepreneurs to stop doing, it would be this. And truly, this is the key to six figures. It really is. I have done it with so many clients to know that for sure. It's not to just, it's to, oh my God, I got confused at how I was saying it. It's not to decide. Hold on. It's to decide that it can work no matter what, instead of there are things that just won't work and there are things that just don't work for me. Cool. Does that make sense? And again, to summarize, the reason that's the key to six figures is because most people get to six figures by really working the same thing. It's not like 13 strategies are working to get them there kind of thing. Obviously, as you scale beyond that and you scale into multi six figures and seven figures, you know, you're adding more pieces to the puzzle in many ways. But to get to that six figure mark, it really is working that thing, not making it mean it's not true. And honestly, leaving a bunch of stuff in your back pocket so that when you want to scale to multi six and seven, you have it there. You don't have 13 stories back here of all this other stuff that doesn't work. You're like, I picked one thing, I worked it really well, I stayed in it, I stayed committed. And that means I have all this other shit I haven't even tried yet. That's amazing. Like, if you can get to that point to hit six and scale past it, like, you will feel so empowered. If you get there and feel like, but I've trapped every other resource, I've tried every other thing, here's the list of all the ways that it's not going to work to go past it. Again, you're stuck, right? So let it go, drop it. Most people feel like it's not working. I'll just give you this one more example because I just thought of it. I literally had a client that was like, totally filled her one-on-one practice and just had her first launch. And it was so funny because we were talking mid-launch, we were on a call, and she was saying to me like, oh, you know, I think like launching just maybe doesn't work for me because it was so easy to fill my one-on-one and this feels so hard and it just doesn't work for me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you thought it was so hard to fill your one-on-one in the moment, and now you have it locked in and it feels like you could do it with your eyes closed. But do you not remember 5 months ago when you were telling me how like it might not work to fill one-on-one? And she was like, oh my God, that's so funny. I've like literally completely blocked that out. Good point. Right. So number one, that's why it's helpful to have a coach. But number two, like, whenever you're looking back, hindsight is so different. Right. So it's so easy to look back and be like, well, that thing was always working, or that was always going to work, but this one isn't. I promise you, with most things, there was a time where you were thinking it wasn't working. Did you stay in it? Right. That's all that happened with her. There were plenty of times in the journey to filling her one-on-one when she didn't think it was working. Now she's full and she knows it works, and the evidence is so built up that her brain totally switches. It's like, oh, that's inevitable. That's done. That works every time. Then she tries a new thing and her brain repeats the same habits. See, it's probably not working. It's like, or we can just go, oh, that's a normal thought to have. I just don't take action based on that thought, right? It's normal to want to go there because it would be easier to just say it's not working and dip out. That's a normal brain process, but it hasn't been true before. So that's another thing I would just give you as a takeaway too, is like, are you kind of using rose-colored glasses on things from the past because your mindset has caught up so much, where there is this fallacy in your brain that there are some things that just always work from the start. You know what I mean? No, it just, you look back and it doesn't feel like a big deal now. Like, so many of my clients have that experience where they look back and they're like, oh my God, like, I vaguely remember freaking the freak out to you about this, but like, I almost can't even get there anymore. Like, I can't even remember how that felt super hard. Yes. Right. Maggie says, oh my gosh, yes, there was a time it was hard and then it got easy and then we forget. Nailed it. Exactly. Exactly. Whole thing right there. There was a time it felt hard, then it got easy, then we forget, right? I have not had a child, but I hear that you totally forget how hard birthing said child was. And that's what happens in business too, I feel like, to a certain extent, right? It's like we forget that it felt really hard. And so we make everything else coming up wrong, versus like probably everything you've done has had some flavor of it's not working until it worked. Cool. Can we normalize that without taking action based on that, without doing that to ourselves constantly, without making our world so small, right? So that is my takeaway for you today. And also that is why mindset is so fucking important. And that is why one-on-one coaching is so important, because those are the two things that change the game there. Seriously, you need that person reflecting that back to you. You need that person showing you when your brain is doing that, because we all have brains that do these things, right? And really having that mindset container to think about it in. Like, you almost can't see how much of a mindset concept this is until you actually look at it. Everyone thinks this is a strategy. The strategy isn't working. The strategy is the problem, et cetera, right? It's a mindset challenge. Trust me. The strategy challenge would be to figure out what we need to shift, but I can't even do that until I get over that mindset hurdle, right? So if you want both of those things, if you want some one-on-one support and you want mindset, I want you to join us for the Million Her Mindset Forum. It's happening. Oh my God, it's happening this week. Fuck, that's so exciting. It's happening in like 5 days. It's happening this Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern to 12 p.m. Eastern. You can just sign up for the Mindset Forum if you like, or you can buy all three, Mindset, Strategy, and Execution, to join us. Basically, what you're going to do is when you sign up, fill out a questionnaire so I can get to know you personally, come to the call. I'll do some teaching on mindset and how I think about mindset that I think is going to help you tremendously. And then we'll dive into personal support and coaching. So if you've been wanting to be coached by me, that's a great way to test the waters, especially on mindset, because I think that's always the most fun and juicy in terms of getting that personal coaching and support. So I would love to see you there if you guys have questions. Ultimately, my goal with it is to really teach you how I think about these concepts and how you can apply them. So with mindset, you're going to walk away knowing exactly how to apply this concept to you daily. I'm going to teach you how I'm really thinking about it, how I'm thinking about it with my clients. So it's going to help you help your clients a lot too. And then personalized support. So you can be anonymous and ask a question in your questionnaire, or you can get live coach. I think a lot of people are wanting to have that live coaching, which I'm super excited about. I'm so excited. And it's stuff like this that's really helpful to see, right? It's like, if I'm coaching someone else on this topic, you're going to start being like, oh, I think I'm doing that too. So it's not just if you get coached that it's going to be valuable. It's going to be really, really valuable regardless. Yeah, I think that's it. Would love to have you guys there. I am just super, super excited to be able to do that. I feel like it's, been a while since I've done anything other than one-on-one, but also feels kind of like just some version of that. So really hope that it is going to serve you. And if y'all have questions or want to join me, let me know. Otherwise, I will drop the link in when I jump off, because I can't remember it right now. And we'll go from there. And if you are signed up, reminder to fill out your questionnaire. We've had a lot of them come in, but we definitely haven't had all of them. So if you're already signed up for the forum, remember to check your email and fill out your questionnaire. I really want to know more about you and your business before you're there. I'm fully reading through and taking notes on all of them. So just remember to do that, because obviously that's going to be a really great part to get the most value out of it. And I really want to be able to be there for you in that way. So if you haven't joined us, join us. It's going to be amazing. If you have, remember to fill out your questionnaire. And otherwise, I will see you guys Saturday. And I hope this helped. I love you all. Bye.